Robert Matthews sat in the corner booth of Sullivan's Diner, his perfectly tailored suit drawing subtle glances from other patrons. Across from him, his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, traced patterns in the condensation on her water glass, her blonde ponytail catching the golden light of the setting sun. It had been 3 months since the divorce. 3 months of learning how to be a single father. 3 months of Tuesday and Thursday evenings and every other weekend. "Daddy, can I have the pancakes?" Emma asked, her voice small and hopeful. "Of course, sweetheart." Whatever you'd like. Robert had built his fortune in commercial real estate. By 52, he'd accumulated more money than 3 generations could spend, but none of it had saved his marriage. None of it had prepared him for these quiet dinners. Just the two of them trying to build a new kind of normal. The waitress took their order, and Robert found himself studying the menu he'd already read, simply to have something to do with his hands. That's when Emma's attention shifted to the booth behind him. "Daddy," she whispered, leaning forward with sudden intensity. "Look." Robert turned carefully, following his daughter's gaze. At the next table sat a young woman, perhaps 30, with 2 children. A boy who looked about Emma's age, and a girl who couldn't have been more than 5. The woman wore a faded blue sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. The children were clean, but dressed in clothes that had clearly seen many washings. Robert watched as the mother studied the menu with careful attention, her lips moving slightly as she added numbers in her head. She said something quietly to the children, and they nodded with the kind of understanding that comes too early to some kids. The waitress approached their table. Robert couldn't hear the entire conversation, but he caught fragments. The woman ordered 2 grilled cheese sandwiches and asked for them to be cut in half. 1 lemonade, 3 straws. No meal for herself. "We'll share," she told her children with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. "It'll be an adventure, like a picnic." The little girl nodded enthusiastically, but the boy, the older one, looked down at the table. He understood. Robert could see it in the set of his small shoulders. Emma turned back to her father, and Robert was startled by the expression on her face. There was no pity there, no childish judgment, just a simple recognition of an opportunity to do something kind. "Dad," Emma said softly, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Can I share with them?" Robert blinked. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Emma gestured to the coins she'd been collecting all week in her little purse. Quarters from the car wash, dimes from helping her grandmother sort laundry, nickels found under sofa cushions. Maybe $3 in total. "I have my money. Can I buy them something? They look hungry." Robert felt something crack open in his chest. Here was his daughter, 7 years old, offering everything she had. "Emma," he began, his throat suddenly tight. "Please, Daddy, we have so much." "And they're just having 1 sandwich for all of them." Robert glanced back at the other table. The mother was doing something on her phone, probably checking a bank balance. The children waited patiently, hands folded, in a way that suggested they'd learned patience the hard way. He thought about his own daughter's closet, full of clothes with tags still attached. He thought about the uneaten meals he'd thrown away, the casual way he tossed $50 bills to valets. "Your coins wouldn't be quite enough," Robert said gently. Emma's face fell. "Oh, but," Robert continued, "I think it's a beautiful idea. Would you like me to help?" Emma's face transformed, lighting up with such pure joy that Robert had to look away for a moment. "Really? You'd help me?" "I'd be honored to help you, sweetheart." When their waitress returned with Emma's chocolate milk, Robert quietly called her over. "The family at table 7, he said, keeping his voice low. "I'd like to cover their meal, but I'd like to do it carefully. Could you tell them that someone already paid for their dinner, and they can order anything they'd like?" The waitress, a woman in her 60s named Margaret, studied Robert's face. She'd worked at Sullivan's for 30 years and had seen every kind of human behavior. "You want it anonymous?" she asked. "Please, and add a gift card to whatever they order. Enough for several more meals. Can the diner do that?" "We can do that," Margaret said, her voice warm. "That's real kind of you." "It's not me," Robert said, glancing at Emma. "It's my daughter's idea. I'm just the bank." Margaret smiled and squeezed his shoulder before walking away. Emma watched eagerly as Margaret approached the other table. They couldn't hear the conversation, but they could see the confusion on the mother's, face slowly transform into disbelief. "There must be a mistake," the woman said, loud enough that her voice carried. Margaret shook her head, smiling. "No mistake, honey. Someone took care of it. You and your babies can order whatever you'd like." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "But who? Why?" Margaret just smiled. "Sometimes people just want to do something kind. What can I get for you?" Robert watched as the mother looked at her children, at the menu, then back at Margaret. The little girl bounced in her seat with excitement. "Can we really have anything?" the boy asked, his voice small with hope. "Anything you want, sweetheart," Margaret assured him. The mother ordered carefully, still mindful of cost even in the midst of this unexpected grace. Chicken tenders for both kids, a burger for herself, a side of vegetables, real lemonade for everyone in their own glasses. When Margaret walked away, the mother put her face in her hands for just a moment. The boy patted her arm awkwardly, and she gathered herself, wiping her eyes and smiling at her children. "See," she told them, "sometimes wonderful things happen when you least expect them. Remember this. Remember that there are good people in the world." Emma turned to her father, her own eyes shining. "Did you see, Daddy? Did you see how happy they are?" "I did, sweetheart. You have a good heart. Mommy always says that kindness is the most important thing. She says even when everything else is broken, kindness can fix things." Robert felt the sting behind his own eyes. His ex-wife and he had failed at many things, but they'd clearly succeeded at raising this extraordinary child. Their own food arrived, and as they ate, Robert found himself watching the other family with a kind of distant contentment. The children were laughing now. The mother was eating without that anxious calculation in her eyes, and for this one meal, in this one moment, their burden had been lifted. "Daddy," Emma said around a bite of pancake. "Yes? When I grow up, I want to be rich like you. But not just to have things. I want to be rich so I can help people, like we help them." Robert set down his fork and looked at his daughter. Really looked at her. "Emma, I need to tell you something important." She tilted her head, waiting. "You're already rich in the ways that matter most. The money, that's just a tool. But what you have in here," he touched his chest over his heart, "that's the real treasure. That's something money can't buy, and you already have more of it than most people collect in a lifetime." Emma considered this seriously. "But the money helps too, right? Like tonight?" "It does. You're absolutely right. Money is a tool, and tools can build good things when they're in good hands. And your hands, Emma, are very good." They finished their meal in comfortable silence. The family at the next table was still there when Robert asked for the check. He left Margaret a substantial tip and stood to help Emma with her coat. As they walked toward the door, the little girl from the other table suddenly appeared in front of them. She held up a crayon drawing, flowers and a sun and stick figures holding hands. "This is for you," she said shyly, looking up at Emma. "Thank you for dinner." Emma knelt down to the girl's level. "You're welcome. I love your picture." "That's you and me," the little girl explained, pointing at two of the stick figures. "We're friends now." "We are," Emma agreed solemnly. "What's your name?" "Sophie. I'm 4 3/4. "I'm Emma. I'm 7. "That's a beautiful name, Sophie." The mother had approached, her face still showing traces of tears. She looked at Robert with an expression that held gratitude, embarrassment, and a fierce dignity all at once. "I don't know what to say," she said quietly. "You didn't have to—" Robert shook his head gently. "My daughter has been teaching me about kindness today. You have beautiful children, and you're doing a wonderful job with them." The woman's chin trembled. "It's been a hard year." "I understand hard years," Robert said, and meant it. "But this is just a meal, a small thing. It's not small to us. Not tonight." They stood there for a moment, two parents, both navigating difficult waters in different boats. "I'm Robert, by the way, and this is Emma. I'm Jennifer. Thank you. Thank you both. We'll pay it forward, somehow." "I know you will," Robert said. And he meant that, too. He could see it in her, the same thing he'd seen in his daughter, that capacity for grace. In the parking lot, Emma held the drawing carefully, protecting it from the evening breeze. "That was a good day, Daddy." "It was, sweetheart." It really was. Robert unlocked the car, but before opening Emma's door, he knelt down beside her. "I'm proud of you, Emma, not just for tonight, but for who you are. You saw someone who needed help, and your first instinct was to give everything you had. That's remarkable. Emma threw her arms around his neck. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the money in the world. As Robert drove home through the twilight, Emma chattering happily about Sophie and the drawing and how maybe they'd see them again at the diner. He found himself thinking about wealth differently than he ever had before. He'd spent 30 years building an empire, measuring success in properties and portfolios. But tonight, in a simple diner, his 7-year-old daughter had shown him what real wealth looked like. It looked like seeing a need and meeting it. It looked like giving without expecting anything in return. It looked like two children sharing a meal because someone decided that kindness mattered more than keeping score. The divorce had broken something in him, but maybe, he thought, watching Emma trace Sophie's stick figures with gentle fingers, maybe broken things could be rebuilt differently, better, with more space for grace. Daddy, Emma said, pulling him from his thoughts. Yes, sweetheart? Can we come back here next week? Maybe Jennifer and Sophie and Michael will be here again. Michael? That's the boy's name. Sophie told me. Robert smiled. We can make it a regular spot. Would you like that? I would. And Daddy, can we bring extra gift cards? Just in case there are other people who need help? Robert's throat tightened again. That's a wonderful idea, Emma. We'll bring several. Good, Emma said with satisfaction, settling back into her seat. Because kindness should happen more than just once. Out of the mouths of babes, Robert thought. Out of the mouths of babes. The city lights began to glow as evening deepened into night. Robert drove carefully, precious cargo beside him, carrying not just his daughter, but also a lesson he'd remember for the rest of his life. Sometimes the greatest wealth is knowing what really matters, and sometimes it takes a child to teach you that seeing others, truly seeing them, and responding with an open heart, that's the only currency that holds any lasting value. In her booster seat, Emma yawned and closed her eyes. Sophie's drawing clutched carefully in her hands, and Robert drove on, grateful beyond measure for this small human being who had reminded him what it meant to be rich in all the ways that mattered most.